Welcome. I'm Melva Persico. Come with me, meet new people, and share their experiences in this episode of Our Culture to the World. My guest today is Fern Havea. So, Fern, please tell us about yourself.
So my name's Fern. I am Fern from Palau, as I'm commonly known around in Sydney. Um, I'm born in New Zealand, but when I was 6 years old, we moved to Palau, which is where my mother's from. My dad's from New Zealand. And as soon as I finished high school in Palau, I left the island, went off to Hawaii, and then I came down to Australia because my dad's family is from this part of the world. Um, Here in Australia, people look at me and they can't quite put their finger on where am I from because I don't look like anyone else and I sound American. And my full name's Fernanda and my surname's Havea. So a lot of people think, you must be South American with a name like Fernanda Havea.
Mhm.
And I say, well, no, Fernanda is because from New Zealand. They named me after my aunt, who's Nanda, and also the New Zealand fern. And Havea is my husband's name, and he's Tongan. So
Ah.
often mistaken for South American, which I'd love to be, but I'm not that exotic.
Oh, I'm from South America. I don't think I'm a
I wish I was.
Okay. Yes, Fern. So you said soon as you left high school, you left and you moved Hawaii and then um Australia. So what were your motivations for migrating?
Yes. So in Palau, there is this culture where when you finish high school, you're expected to go overseas and get an education, get a university education, get some experience. And you're also expected to come back and give back to the society that you're in. But I had a very interesting upbringing in Palau because my parents were divorced growing up, and I had two exposures to two different kinds of lives. My dad is Australian; he's from New Zealand, and we had that Western exposure with him. And with my mom, she was a very traditional Palauan lifestyle, and my mom wasn't the wealthiest person on the island, so it was really grassroots kind of experience for us, which was great. I really appreciate it to this day. At my dad's house, we all had our own bedrooms. We had air condition. When I turned 16, he bought me a car. So I was lucky enough to have that exposure while living in the island. And I kind of decided for myself, I would like to have that kind of lifestyle, and for many reasons, but I want that kind of lifestyle in my adulthood. Now, I have six siblings, and four of them are still back home in Palau, and I have my youngest brother here with me in Australia. So, we all were able to make a choice. What kind of lifestyle do you want? Do you want to live in Western society, or did you want to we live in Palau? So I think we're very lucky to have that option.
Okay, okay. Yes, so how long have you lived in Australia?
I've lived in Australia longer than I've lived in any other country. And
Oh,
I actually ticked over, I think it was about 3 years ago. Was it 3 years ago or thereabouts? I ticked over where Australia is now the longest place I've lived. But the funny thing is, I identify as Palauan because I grew up there from 6 to 18. That's where I lived. And that really shaped me and my personality. And I had this kind of, I don't know, identity crisis, maybe you could say, to think, maybe I need to embrace because I am an Australian, I have an Australian passport. Maybe I need to embrace this because I've lived here. I know the culture. When people are talking about things that happened in their childhood, because remember, I moved here when I was about 19, 20. So I still was able to participate in that. I kind of grew up in it in a way too.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I've
You
lived
were a young
here.
adult, yeah.
I was a young adult here and I had all those experiences here, and I need to embrace it. And my husband, a quick story about him. His both parents are Tongan and they migrated from Tonga. They both have passed away, but when they were alive, I really related to them. We will talk for hours about what it's like growing up in the island. So they were there 40 years ago. And Palau still is very much, when my mother-in-law went to Palau, she was crying and she says, this is what Fiji looked like 20 years ago, not Tonga, but Fiji. And Fiji's beautiful, mind you. So we had a lot in common. But my husband, he was born and raised here. And if you ask him, where are you from? He says he's Australian because when you go, we went to the islands with him, and this boy has no idea. Like he,
Totally lost.
they wouldn't survive. I just loved how my husband just embraced. Like I do meet people who were born and raised here, but their parents migrated, and they do have this identity crisis. Like we want to still connect to where we're from, but they can't really because they didn't grow up in it. Where my husband, he just embraces, I was born, I was raised here, I understand the culture in Australia. And he just carries, and he just has that confidence about him. And I thought that's quite nice. And my daughter, she's more interested in our cultures. Now, if you ask her where she's from, she's Tongan, Palauan, Australian, Hawaiian. I don't know how Hawaii got in there. Um, he has an auntie living in Hawaii, so apparently she's Hawaiian. And she loves that she has all these different cultures. Anyway, I'm straying off
Yes,
topic,
no,
but
that's
anyway,
fine. That's fine. And, it's good for her to be able to learn from, these bits and pieces of, the
of what makes
cultures
you,
that help to
yeah,
shape her. Yes,
yeah,
of course. So now, like you said, this is Australia's, you've lived there, the place you've lived there for the longest time.
yeah,
And have you noticed any notable similarities or differences, or similarities and differences between life in Australia and life in Palau that
yeah.
you'd like to share?
I do. I found a bigger difference between Australian and American. Australians are very easygoing. There's a saying, they say she'll be right. And they also say no worries. When someone asks, "Hey, can you do this?" No worries, no worries. It's just this really laid back, chill kind of attitude. So I that's very similar to Palauan attitude. It's very easygoing. She'll be right. Think, let the chips fall where they may kind of attitude. And I really appreciated that. But I do notice a big difference between my Palauan and Western society. And it's a difference between, in Palau, it's very much a collective society where we help each other. And in Western society, I find it's very focused on the individual.
Individual, yeah.
So growing up, my family thought me to be very selfish. And, I embraced it. That's okay. It's I think in Palau, people will look at Western people as being selfish. And I think the reason why we're a bit more selfish in Western society is because um, the cost, the cost of not, okay, how am I supposed to say this? There's a greater cost of being poor in Western society than there is in Palau. Okay, so in Palau, if you're poor, what's the worst case scenario? You have a home, you have food, your neighbors will feed you, your family will feed you, you'll be right. So they turn off your electricity. So what?
Mhm.
Where in Western society, the cost of being poor is great. You'll get kicked out of your home, you won't have food. So I find that here we have to be a bit, in Western society, we have to be a bit more selfish, and we can't be as generous as we are back in Palau. Now, I remember my mom never had any money. She was always poor. And to this day, she's still very poor. And I remember I was about, I don't know, 12 years old. And all the money she had in the world was $5, just $5. And she went and talked to one of her cousins, and they were doing it tough. And she took the $5 and gave it to them. And I thought, Mom, why are you giving them your last money? Now you're poor. And she goes, No, no, they need it more than me. And I'm like, How can they need it more than you? You now have nothing. And that's why they thought, I was a bit selfish. So I was always a bit prone more to Western society, the way that I think.
Oh,
Um, but
yeah, because
also,
oh, sorry, go ahead,
yeah,
go ahead.
you go, sorry.
Because I was wondering why you said selfish, because you had, you said the ways in which, there's this community spirit and
Yeah.
helping of one another. But then you said you your family kind of, you were raised selfish. So, but it was you were a little different from
I was I was a little different. But this is the way the Palauan people would view Western world, to think these people are a lot more self-centered and selfish, where in Palau it's very, very giving, like very giving. Um, I remember, like, in my mom's house, we were so poor that they would cut our power supply and we would have no power.
Mm.
for weeks, no power. And what we do, when I was a little kid, I would like sneak to the neighbor. Well, we had an extension cord, and we lived in apartments, and I had a neighbor, and our bathroom windows were connected, and I went outside and I put my hand through his window and connected to his power supply. So the power cord went from his house through
Mhm.
my bathroom, and we had extension cords throughout the house, and that's how we had power. Now, I know he knew. He knew. Like, how did he not know? Like, of course he knew, but he never said anything. And that's just, and of course we'd never ask, right? Like, but that's just, how loving and giving. So that's when we were living in an apartment. Then we moved to a more traditional Palauan house where um, very much connected to nature kind of thing. So, but I also remember when I graduated high school. So in high school, I quite took to my studies, and I did quite well in high school. And if there was a debate team, I participated. So I think people recognized that I was doing well. And when I graduated high school, I had senators of Palau, senators that I don't even know. They gave me envelopes of cash, like we're talking $1,000, $500 in cash. And even though they're not related to me, there was a note, come back and, to better your country. And I
Mhm.
was like, no, I'm out. Bye. So how bad is I know I'm so bad. I'm sorry. But it's that very like there is a lot of corruption in Palau. So, if you look at politics, it's very corrupt, but the corruption does trickle back down to the everyday people. It doesn't just go down to one's family. So I did really appreciate that when I was in Palau.
Right. And the thing is, your circumstances, like you knew you wanted a different kind of life. And sometimes, your circumstances would have allowed you to go back, but then, or
Yeah.
maybe not, and in your
Yeah.
case, well,
Yeah.
your circumstances just didn't allow you to go back.
They
So you
Well, I didn't really want to, but anyway. But I remember another noticeable difference I found in Palau when anyone can discipline children. Well, I don't know what it's like today because remember I this was
right.
ages ago, so I don't know what it's like today, but anyone can discipline other people's children, and the and we see that as love. If someone was yelling at my kid, I would think, "Oh, thank you so much for correcting my kid. Like you care for my child. If you didn't care
Right.
for my child, you'd let my kid act up." So it's an act of love. Now, when I was about 24 years old, I had to bring my youngest brother from Palau here. I had to kind of remove him from the situation he was. And that was a whole nother story about his experience coming from the sticks, from the bush of Palau here. But I put him into high school, and I remember I had to go to the school office one day to have a chat about something. And when I walked into the office, I noticed there was a mother and a child there yelling, and the mother was yelling at the people in the office. And I'm sure it happens in Palau, but the way I was raised, you do not do that because you're not teaching your child to respect the office. If
Right.
I wasn't happy with the school, with my brother, he would stay home. I would go and I would sort it out, not in front of him. Because in front of him, I would have to show that I respect the teachers. I remember we were naughty kids, so we were taught by Dr. Pauline Baird,
Mhm.
and we were naughty kids. And many a times we had to stay back school maybe an hour, and we go home late. And when we go home, we get in trouble again because you
Right.
weren't acting right. You're going to get in trouble. Where here, if that happens, the teachers get in trouble. So it's it's this message, and I kind of struggled with that because when I moved here, if so, I do have a lot of Polynesian friends, so I've kind of fallen into the Pacific Islander community here because we don't have any Palauans here. I'm the only one, myself and my brother, and they have a similar culture where if I don't like discipline. If I say, hey, don't do that, like I'm not smacking them or anything, but just making sure they do the right thing,
Mhm.
it's good. Where if you do that to an Australian person's family, kid, they're like, how dare you yell at my kid? Like,
Right.
don't do that. And for us, that's an act of love. You do that because you love someone and you want them to do well.
Right.
um I remember as a kid, um being asked to do chores. We used to just think, oh, that's fantastic, they're asking me to do chores because they love me. isn't that just so twisted? Where if I was in trouble, they wouldn't ask me to do anything. And I'm like, oh crap, they're not asking me to help out. I must be in big trouble. Isn't that just strange? Very different kind of lifestyle.
Yes, yes, and yes, and I can imagine, I mean, when you moved, you were already, you were not a young child, you were a young adult, but for your brother, it must have been it must have taken quite a bit of adjustment for him.
It really was. I remember when he first came to Australia, he opened up the fridge and he looked around and he said, "Where did the food come from?" And I had to explain to him how it works. We have jobs, they give us money. When we have the money, we go to the shops and we buy our food with that money. Like he had no idea because he grew up with he's my half brother. He grew up with his grandparents and they were fishermen. If any, his grandfather would have nets and they would just throw the nets and catch their fish, and a very traditional lifestyle. And they had gardens and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
you do go to the store, but the shop is kind of like where you buy not the essentials, but like the I don't know, like condiments and
Right.
things. But your main food comes, you get your own main food.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
very big culture shock for him.
From the garden and from the sea and
Yeah,
so on. Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Wow.
yeah,
So now you said, you in Australia and you interact with Australians, but you socialize with, yes,
yeah.
would be more in the Polynesian group. Would that be correct? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's more my friends and family circle
Right.
because my husband's Tongan. But my where I work, we get the beautiful thing about Sydney is it truly is quite multicultural, and and that's reflected in the workplace as well. And we get very authentic Indian food, very authentic South American food, and I love that. But I do love sharing my culture with them. Like I
Yes.
can't
Go ahead and tell us about that.
yeah, I can't really share the food with them because I can't afford I can't afford seafood here. I'm like, I call my mom and my mom goes, "Oh, Fern, we're so poor. We're eating crab and fish." I'm like, "Oh, you poor thing." And I say to her,
And
"I'm
you
so
longing for
poor.
some crab and fish.
I can't afford that here. That's rich people's food here." And I say to my mom, "Oh, I'm so poor. I'm eating chicken and beef and lamb." And she goes, "Oh, you lucky." So, but I do love sharing my culture. Just explaining how it works. In my last job, I have this manager, his name's Ian Campbell, and he really mentored me, and he's the reason why I'm in the industry I'm in today. I'm in finance. So he really took me in and helped mentored me to be a manager and whatnot. But I invited him to come back to Palau with me, him and his wife. And they did. They took me up on the offer. They came back to Palau. We went to my mom's home. And now in Palau, we don't have couches. Well, at least our family does. I'm sure they do. But, my family we're not the richest people. So they went to my mother's house. We sit on the floor. Back then, we don't have cups. We just use jars. And who would have thought jars are now all the
I know,
rage now,
yeah.
right? Like it's fancy, but we grew up with that but anyway. And I remember my Ian would say to me, "Fern, can we go to the shops and buy your mom plates and buy your mom this and buy your mom that?" And I said to Ian, "Don't waste your time. Don't just wait. Just give her a week and you tell me if you would buy things for her." Um, so my mom asked us, "What do you want to eat? What do you want for dinner tomorrow?" And he'd ask, "Why is she asking?" And I said, "Well, she has to go source it. She'll have to go fish for it, or you get one of her cousins or uncles to go source it for us." And then he thought, "Wow, this is pretty good. Like your fridge is actually the land. That's your fridge." And I said, "Yes." He did give my mom a gift, because it is also traditional here in Australia, right? When you go to someone's home, don't go empty-handed. And he noticed a couple of days later she's not using it, and I said, "No, because she gives it to other people." My mom, I swear, she has like holes in her hands. Anything you give her, she gives it to someone else because someone always needs something more than she does. Um, and at the end of his stay, he said to me, "I do not feel sorry for your mom. I do not feel sorry for your family. These are some of the richest people I know."
Mhm.
in Palau, well, at least my family and most of the people I know, we're not materialistic. We don't really care. Where I found that here, especially in living in a Sydney, in the city, everyone cares about the nicest car, the nicest house. For us, I don't care. I don't even care what clothes I wear. I don't even wear makeup because I don't care. But that's the kind of and that's one big difference I have between being raised in Palau and people raised here is, I don't really focus on that stuff because I know when you're living in Palau, there's more bigger problems in
Right.
life than what you look like. If there was a drought or if there was a typhoon that came across, we're worrying about, are our crops okay? Do we have enough water on the land? So
Mhm.
these problems seem to just disappear.
Right, right, yes. So you just like life is your focus in life, and your priorities are completely different.
Yeah.
So he realized that she was rich
Oh
in
yeah.
so much more than material richness.
Oh yeah.
What was much more important. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, of course. So what are there any aspects of, before we move on to what I wanted to ask you next, I noticed that behind you you have the storyboards, the Palauan storyboards, and the viewers, those of you who have been watching for a while now, you would know that in my very first episode of Our Culture to the World, Dr. Pauline Baird, who was Fern's teacher, um, she spoke about living in Palau, and she told us about the story of the turtle on this. So, Fern, could you tell us a little bit about the storyboard and maybe one of the stories you have there?
Yeah. So on the wall, so in Palau, we have oral history. We remember our stories. We might carve them in our homes. So the beams of the house would be carved with stories. We also have chanting, and history is passed through our chanting as well. But
Wow.
yes, up here, this is the storyboard of the lovers where they meet on Nemilis. So Dr. Baird told us about that already. This story, this story is about a man, and he went out fishing. Here's the boat.
Wow.
And at the end of his fishing trip, his boat was full of fish and it was time to go home. And he was catching the tides and the wind to go back home. Now, on his way home, he saw a turtle in the water. And in Palau, this is another thing I got beaten up for here is we eat turtle, and it's how dare you eat turtle? And I was like, well, how dare you eat cows? Anyway. So but we eat everything on a turtle and we even use the shell. But anyway, so the man saw a turtle and he looked at the turtle and he goes, oh, I want that turtle. His eyes got bigger and he's like, give me the turtle. So he jumped into the water to chase the turtle. And what happened is the boat went that way and the turtle went that way. And he was left in the middle of the ocean with nothing.
Oh.
So the moral of the story is you should be happy with what you have, right? The guy had a boat full of fish. He was on his way home. Just be happy with what you have. Just be content, because if
Right.
you become too risky, you might lose everything. You lose it all. And isn't that quite different to Western society? They teach you to take big risks, and big risks pay off. Where this story is different. Be humble. Be happy with what you have. Live within your means.
Be
Kind of
content. Yes,
be
yes.
content. So
Very,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
beautiful
that's that
story.
story.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes, and I do. And wow, I would just love to see the carvings, the beams of the whole houses with those carvings. I can imagine it's really. I mean,
yeah.
probably people there probably just think, okay, this is what we do. But I think for those of us who are not used to that, it would be something to behold.
We even have like more recent stories. Well, not recent, but um, on one of the traditional houses, there's a story of when um, the white man came to Palau and they had their all their clothes on, and because they got shipwrecked, they were hanging their clothes outside. So we the people thought that, like, oh, there's his arms, there's his legs, there's his body, there's his head with his hat. Like they all had different body parts that, because,
Mhm.
they, in Palau, we just have grass skirts, and the men wears, like these sacks around their loins and things. So silly things like that would be on carved on the houses.
Right, right. Yes. So now in Australia, what are there any aspects, or I'm sure there are, but what aspects of Australian life and culture would you say have had, a big impact on you?
Yeah, quite a lot of things. I had to learn moving to Western society. I did have to learn, I guess, the nuances of the culture here. Like someone actually told me, you can't just rock up to people's houses. You have to call first. How embarrassing. Because in Palau, it's okay just to rock up to someone's house. No one cares. Like when um when you go to someone's house here, you're supposed to call first. They make their house nice and tidy. Like we don't care about that stuff. When people come over to my house, I don't apologize. I say I live here. If my house looks messy, it's because we live in it. Like, but aspects that have changed me. I've been here longer than any other country. I would find as a Palauan, I'm a lot more forthright, but I don't really have that subtleness about me. So that's not very attractive in our culture. In Palau, we have this, we call it malang mes kind of attitude. And what that means is being subtle about things and being a lot humble. So if someone says to me, oh, I like your shirt, well, I have to give, if someone says to me, I like your shirt, well, I have to give them my shirt, right? Like,
Oh, yes,
and
I heard that. I heard that. Yes.
and there's a dance to it. So I'm like, oh, here, take it. And they're supposed to say, no, 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 no. And I'm supposed to say, no, no, please, I insist, I insist. And then they say, oh, no, no, no. But really they want it. But we have to do this dance.
Mhm.
And then finally you just have to shove it in their bag and insist, no, you have to take it. Like
Mhm.
it's that whole kind of you can't just. So I remember I went back and um someone offered me something and I'm like, yeah, okay, why not? Because I'm supposed to say no. No, no, it's okay. Oh no, I insist. Like, just get over it. I mean, you're gonna give it to me. Let me have it. Like, let's not do this back and forth dance. So
And they're like,
they're just like, wow, that's a little bit too forthright of you. But when I go back, they call me a tourist, and I'm fine with that. So,
oh, wow.
um, yeah, so that's one thing. And the other thing is in Palau, when you're giving, if you give someone to something, you give without expecting anything in return, nor do you have an obligation, the receiver, to reciprocate. And because you know they will if they could. Where in Western society, if someone gives you a gift, you think, oh crap, now I have to get them something.
Mm. Yeah.
It's
Well, not necessarily.
here. So that's another thing that I learned where, when you give, just give and it's done. You don't
Right.
expect anything in
Right.
return.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, something that you said that we were on a Zoom together a few weeks back, and you mentioned something that I found really intriguing. And it had to do with the matrilineal nature of Palauan culture.
Yeah.
So, and then is when I said, "Oh, I need to talk to Fern to for her to share this with the viewers of our culture to the world." So, Fern, tell us, what is this? How is this culture a matrilineal culture? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So in Palau, it is a matriarchal society. And how what it means is, so we do have traditional leaders, but with our leaders, there is a male and a female counterpart. So there's not one higher than another. They both, and don't you think like today, this is what we need? We need more perspective. A male and a female perspective equally is great. So that's what we have. But who chooses the leaders are the women,
Okay.
not the men. So the women choose the leaders. The other thing is a property, traditional titles are passed through the woman's line.
Mhm.
So my brother, he could be, so because my mom's Palauan, whatever rights she has, we have it. Where if my dad comes from another family, like those things don't go through him, so it goes through the women.
Okay.
Um, so my brother could be a leader, I could be the female counterpart, but his kids would take after his wife's
Right.
land and titles. And the way I see it is, you can prove who your mother is, but you can't prove who your father is. That could be questionable. Who's your father? But there's no doubt who your mother is.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. So The other way it works, so you can see I'm wearing Palauan money. This is the Palauan traditional money.
Oh.
And women wear the money, not the men. It's the women who wear it. Um, if there was, let's say, someone in my family passed away, the family I would be grieving, and my brother's wives, they're married in, they would come in with their family, they would cook for us, they will help us, and people will come and give us envelopes, give us money.
Mhm.
And at the end of it, we have to give that money, we have to give the physical money, paper money, and our money, we give it to my my brother's wives. So it's actually quite, if you have a family full of daughters, you're going to do quite well because they will bring in a lot of money to your family,
Mhm.
which is not true of sons. So
Oh, okay,
it's
okay.
a
Yeah.
very different way of thinking. And growing up in that culture, I didn't feel there was any difference between being a male or being a female. Like both of us, we both have opportunities. And in Australia, there's this big thing. There's a big, in the whole world, right? We have this pay gap between men and women. We have
Mhm.
with jobs, right? Men are more likely to get better paying jobs, better opportunities, promotions, and
Right.
not the women. Where in Palau, I never really found that. And I think it was good to grow up in a society where I'm just as valuable and we value the roles that we bring as men and the roles that as men and women bring. So
Mhm.
it's not one's better than the other, but it does help that we have all these extra privileges as women.
Yes, nice. Well, you know what? I was wondering too when I thought about when I heard about this. Does that affect naming, like the last name that you carry? Um, like let's say, do you carry when you were growing up, did you carry your mother's last name because of that um
Oh, the
nature of
way
the society?
Yeah, so the whole naming, that was more of a Western influence that came into Palau. So the way
Okay.
it works, you take your father's first name as your last name, and it's more
Oh,
like to identify who you are. So they don't use last names. They would take the father's first name. So the woman, like my husband's name, Stephen, I would be Fernanda Stephen, just to
oh,
identify. So, but that's something relatively new to the culture.
oh,
Um,
okay. Mhm.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, okay. Oh, I see. And
But
then, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, but growing up as a young child and as a teenager in Palau, knowing that, I'm a woman, I can do anything. I work in a very male dominated industry, which is finance. And I was one of the only females in leadership um, working in finance. And when we were in team meetings, I remember we were in team meetings and the women would get shut down. They would voice their opinion and people will shut them down. And I would think, why is this happening? Where when I voice my opinion, no one dare shut me down. If anything, when I voiced my opinion, I had the other dominant men in the room back me up, kind of thing. And you know, I was thinking, could it be because I was raised knowing that you know, I, I go about it very maybe assertively.
Right, because
I don't. Maybe is it something to do with the way I was raised, where for me, I think I am female. Hear me roar, because I am female. That gives me extra strength and extra power. Like in Palau, as a woman, I think we really I think it's such power you have to be able to bear children, right? And raising children, and like you control the home and the tone you set in a family, it sets the tone for the family, I should say. So we see that as like such a powerful thing. And I have that in me. I go out confidently. I am a woman. I work in this industry. Don't you dare mess with me, kind of attitude. Where I've noticed in Western society, you're a stay-at-home mom. Oh, poor you. I'm like, no, she's a stay-at-home mom. Good on her. Like
But I
she
think
is
that's
raising.
changing. That's changing a little bit now. Well,
Yeah,
I think it's changing now because people are attaching more value to
to it.
stay-at-home moms
Yeah.
and
But
maybe.
it's still, we're still being disadvantaged in Western society because the woman's removed from the workforce. So, we have I work in the retirement space. So that time you're removed from the workforce, you're being left behind, how you're not being kept up with the people who continue to work. So I don't know. I can't solve that problem. That's a bigger problem than you and I.
Yes, but yeah, but and I guess maybe because, as you said, of how you were raised, when you voice your opinion, you have a degree of confidence and
Yeah,
assertiveness that maybe some of the other women in the industry, they're more tentative in the way they
yeah.
say what they have to say, and maybe that's why they listen to you more.
Who knows? I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so this is very interesting. But let me just circle back to the money. This is the
yeah.
traditional money. What is it actually made of?
So it's ceramic clay, and I read somewhere that it doesn't come from Palau. They traced it to India or Egypt. Now, how true that is, I don't know
Mm,
where it comes from, but it is something that's passed in families. And it also can be passed around when we have customs and things like that. So now the way it works is because I'm a married woman, I'm not supposed to be wearing Palauan money because my husband's family is supposed to put money on my neck.
mm,
If I was married to a Palauan and I was wearing my family's money, that's really embarrassing because I'm pretty much saying my husband's family can't decorate me and I have to, rely on my own family. That's really bad.
mm.
Um, Now, because my husband's not Palauan, it doesn't matter. So I'm not offending
Okay,
anyone.
yeah.
But I do have brothers and they do have partners, so they really should be the one wearing this, not me. But I'm living in Australia and my mom can't get it back. No, I
Okay.
do. Yeah. So the way the money works is I kind of the joke I do is you're your husband's family's Christmas tree. So
Mm,
they're supposed to give you the money, and the women married into the family would be our pride. Like, yes, she's married to my brother. Look at her money. We're taking good care of her.
okay.
um,
Mm,
Early on, when I went back to Palau, I used to be really skinny. And my mom and my grandmother would say, "What is wrong with you? Isn't your husband's family taking care of you? You're too skinny. They're not taking care of you." So, there's that thing where we do have to take care of our sister-in-laws.
mm.
Again, that's the matriarchal society. We have to give them
Right.
money. We have to make sure they're happy, well fed, and things like that, and make sure they're comfortable.
And what is that called? What is it called in your local language? The
Oh,
traditional
so
money.
I don't know. I've been away too long, but each of them, like some of them, would actually have their individual names.
Or because like
Um,
different currency kind of
yeah, and they have
value,
names.
different.
Yeah, the different shapes have different names. I don't know what it is. My language is so bad.
Okay.
And some money themselves, like individual money, would have their own names attached to
Okay.
it too. Yeah,
Mm.
but I don't know what the names are.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yes. So, Fern, thank you so much. This has been wonderful, learning so much about you and your experiences. And before we end our conversation, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share about the importance of appreciating other cultures?
Yeah, I I love where in Sydney that we are such a melting pot of different cultures. And one thing I really appreciate is, especially in Sydney, we want people to keep their culture, keep their identity, because you're bringing spice, you're bringing flavor to the group. I find that at work too. I remember when I started 15 years ago in one of my jobs, we had this Chinese girl and she gave us an Anglican name. She gave herself and we said, "No, what's your real name?" And she told us her real name. And we said, "We can say your name.
Yes.
Say, keep your name. Your mother gave you that name. Keep your name." So I love this is one thing I just love. I love learning about different cultures. And people come in and bring us their authentic food and just embracing it and not having this need to conform to,
Mm.
let's not all be the same. That's too boring. So yeah, I think it's great we're learning about different cultures. And just I think it's important for us to encourage people to embrace theirs and share theirs and not be embarrassed. Don't change your name. Your name is your name. They can learn how to say your name.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. Yes. So, Fern, thank you. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I know the viewers will enjoy listening to what you had to share today. And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. We're going to see you soon as we meet more people and continue to share wonderful experiences in our next episode of Our Culture to the World. Thank you, Fern.
Thanks. Bye-bye.